Before I was born, before my parents were born, today's guest and her family were abducted by the Nazis, beginning an unbelievable journey of over 90 years. On this episode, Edith Eger is here to teach us how to make the choice for compassion. This is Coaching for Leaders, episode 336.
Produced by Innovate Learning, maximizing human potential.
Greetings to you from Orange County, California. This is Coaching for Leaders, and I'm your host, Dave Stachowiak. Leaders aren't born, they're made. And this weekly show gives you access to the practical wisdom that will empower you to become a better leader. I am so glad that you tuned in for this conversation, because today, a conversation, one that every leader, I think I dare say every leader would benefit from hearing, because so much of what we do, the work we do as leaders, is about compassion. It is about forgiveness in some ways, and it is always about, dare I say, love. The work we do to develop people, to care about people. And today's guest is someone who perhaps more than any guest I've ever had on this show, not only knows about this from firsthand experience, but has developed such an eloquence and an ability to speak to love and forgiveness and compassion in a way that I think we'll probably never hear from any other on the show. I am really thrilled to welcome Edith Eger to the show. Edith was 16 years old when the Nazis came to her hometown in Hungary and took her Jewish family to an internment center and then to Auschwitz. Her parents were sent to the gas chamber by Joseph Mengele soon after they arrived at the camp. Hours later, Mengele demanded that Edie dance a waltz to the Blue Danube and rewarded her with a loaf of bread that she shared with her fellow prisoners. These women later helped save Edie's life. Edie and her sister survived Auschwitz and managed to live until the American troops liberated the camps in 1945 and found Edie in a pile of dying bodies. One of the few living Holocaust survivors to remember the horrors of the camp, Edie has chosen to forgive her captors and find joy in her life every day. Years after she was liberated from the concentration camps, Edie went back to college to study psychology. Today, at 90 years old, Edie is a renowned psychologist and speaker who specializes in treating patients with traumatic stress disorders. She is the author of the recently published book, The Choice: Embrace the Possible, a book that Desmond Tutu calls a gift to humanity, one of those rare and eternal stories that you don't want to end and that leave you forever changed. Edie, welcome to Coaching for Leaders.
Thank you so much for the wonderful introduction. I'm so looking forward to have a wonderful dialogue with you. Well, I never ask my patients, how can I help you? Because I don't want to ever infantilize people, but I can say, how can I be useful to you? Because I'm doing it with you.
Well, what a wonderful way to start. It's one of the questions I find myself asking often as well, is what was useful or how can we be useful in our conversations? And as I was reading your biography, in so many ways, it's such an improbable life story. And yet here you are. And the thing that struck me as I was reading the book is that this book just came out, of course. And the story is, of course, many decades old. What is it that motivated you to write this book just now, so many years later?
Such a beautiful question, because I tried so many times, and somehow one day I decided that I have now great grandsons. I have 4 generations now, which I consider the best revenge to Hitler. That maybe I want to let them know that it's not what happens in life, it's what we do with it. That you can choose to only look at the darkness or the discoveries that you made. And that's how I see Auschwitz. I see Auschwitz as an opportunity for each of us to somehow recognize that we have the power within us, not to react, but how to respond.
Mm. One of the lessons you teach about in the book, but also I know in your speaking, is you share the story of what your mother said to you on the way to Auschwitz, that no one can take away from you what you put in your own mind.
Yeah, this is something that perhaps your mom told you as well. And guess what? That's exactly what happened. Everything was taken away from me. Everything except my mind. And I had my sister. And today I beg parents, don't spoil your children, because spoiled children don't master anything on their own. And that kind of dependency can really breed depression, because it's all external. I think that many people who are waiting for happiness to come from the outside are not going to be happy unless they discover that they have a choice. They have a choice to look at everything in life as not a recovery, but a discovery.
I suspect there are so many young people who will read your book and come away with so many lessons from it. And I'm curious, what is it that you hope that the young folks, especially listening, will discover from your story?
Yes. At 90, hopefully, I can do everything in my power to be a good role model, and especially young people, because they are the ambassadors for peace. They are the future leaders. I'm very invested in the young to let them know how to take education seriously so they can truly hold themselves responsible. And I see that young people do speak up. I really like that kind of righteous anger, not, I don't want any violence, but I can see that people speak up now, and I'm very proud of the young people who do that. And I think you and I can now dialogue about how we can truly empower those young, precious people with their one-of-a-kind, unique, beautiful way, because there'll never be another you. It's good to celebrate, when you get up in the morning and look in the mirror, because self-love is self-care. It's not narcissistic.
I read many years ago Viktor Frankl's work, and I know you were friends with Frankl.
Yes, I was just going to tell you that not until I was at the university and someone handed me a book, Man's Search for Meaning, I was in complete denial. I didn't have the verbal capacity because I didn't want people to feel sorry for me until I read Man's Search for Meaning, and I became a diplomate in logotherapy, and I'm certainly so grateful that I write that book as a female voice of Viktor Frankl.
Oh, indeed. And I love your book as a follow-up to Frankl's work, because you have you've taken so many of the lessons from your experience in the camps, and then you also share so many of the lessons that came out of your experience with patients, which I love. And in fact, of all the things in the book that are compelling and that will stay with me, the story that I just cannot continue to keep, I just can't stop thinking about, is the story, and I hope you don't mind me sharing just a brief synopsis of something you shared in the book, of a story of two patients that came into your office, and you probably know which one I'm going to share. This one stays with me, and I'll read what you wrote. One morning, I saw two patients back to back, both mothers in their 40s. The first woman had a daughter who was dying. She spent most of her visit crying, asking how God could take her child's life. It hurt so much. I hurt so much for this woman. She was absolutely devoted to her daughter's care and devastated by her impending loss. The next patient had just come from the country club, not the hospital. She too spent much of the hour crying. She was upset because the new Cadillac had just been delivered and it was the wrong shade of yellow. On the surface, her problem seemed petty, especially compared to the previous patient's anguish over her dying child. But I knew enough about her to understand that her tears of disappointment over the color of her car were really tears of disappointment over the bigger things in her life that hadn't worked the way she had hoped for: a lonely marriage, a son who had been kicked out of yet another school, the aspirations for a career that she had abandoned in order to be more available for her husband and child. Often the little upsets in our lives are emblematic of the larger losses. The seemingly insignificant worries are representative of greater pain. I realized that day how much my two patients, who appeared so different, had in common with each other and with people everywhere. Both women were responding to a situation they couldn't control, in which their expectations had been upended. Both were struggling and hurting because something was not what they wanted or expected it to be. They were trying to reconcile what was with what ought to have been.
Yes, yeah.
I know that you suffered from survivor's guilt for many, many years.
Yes.
What ultimately set you free from that guilt?
Well, many people tell me, Edie, you have overcame. And I can tell you that I did not overcome, and I did not forget what happened. I just don't live there. I live in a present, and I can only touch you now, but that doesn't mean I fight the past or run away from the past as I did until I was able to go back to Auschwitz, go back to that lion's den and reclaim my innocence and assign the shame and guilt to the perpetrator and finally begin to forgive myself that I survived, because I graduated with honors and I never showed up for my graduation because I said to myself that I'm here, I'm alive, and they're not. So you see, I didn't need a Nazi out there. I had one in me. So today I ask people to look at the part in you that somehow leads you to self-sabotage and not to truly embrace yourself and accept yourself. And I began to work with PTSD with Vietnam veterans, and I had two paraplegics with the same symptomatology and same diagnosis, but one of them was really just shout and curse and was always against. And conversely, the other one said to me, Doc, I'm in a wheelchair, and I'm so grateful that God gave me a second chance in life. I can see the flowers closer, my children's eyes, and I felt like a terrible imposter. I had a white coat on, I had Dr. Eger, Department of Psychiatry, and I had a 16-year-old in me that I ran away from, and that's when I decided to go back to Auschwitz and revisit the place where I've been and relive that experience. And today, that's really helped me to not to call myself a therapist, but a guide. I guide people, I hold your hand, and we go and visit the places where you've been, but you don't get stuck in there. I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, but I don't camp there or set up household there.
Much of your professional work has been helping people to move to that place. And I'm so curious, when people arrive at that place where they feel that freedom and they've made that choice, as you talk about in the book, what is different about them?
Well, again, I can only speak for myself. I somehow don't feel I have arrived. I'm still in a process of, I'm climbing that mountain, and I sleep and I climb, but I have yet to arrive. I think I'm just on that journey. I don't know what will happen tomorrow, but I know right now I'm speaking to you, and I feel delighted that your interest in it is in someone like me, that you want to learn from history. And many people think that forgiveness is that you're going to forget. I will never forget. And I will not overcome. I came to terms with it. It's a cherished wound that makes me appreciate every moment. And so I'm just very blessed that I was given that chance to guide people from victimization to empowerment, from darkness to light. I like to call myself a guide. I like movement. So if I hold your hand, and I am going to really somehow guide you to see to your freedom, but I have yet to arrive myself, and I enjoy that journey beautifully. I go dancing every Sunday, and I go swing dancing. So when I speak at schools, they call it supermarket music. And that's okay. That's okay. I'll go to the supermarket music, but it doesn't mean that my music is better or less than your music. Mm. And so I was dancing Cosmos. Some people had a wonderful full anniversary of a company that started 50 years ago. And so wherever I am, I hope to, just learn and fit in, but that doesn't mean I'm going to be less than who I am. I think that's what my mom told me, that my mind is with me. So the Nazis could beat me and torture me and throw me in a gas chamber, but they could never, ever murder my spirit. That's what I bring you today. And I teach my patients how to respond and not to allow anyone to get to you without your allowing them.
As you were sharing that analogy of being a guide, of holding hands, and of being on the journey yourself, I couldn't help but just think of how much that is like so many in our community who listen to the show every week, of how there are so many questions we still have, and yet so much of leadership is about holding that person's hand, if not literally, figuratively, and being the guide and asking questions versus being the dictator, and so many lessons.
I am the most curious 90s. I'm going to ask questions. I don't have the answers, but I'm going to ask questions. I also like to concentrate on a what and a how rather than the why, because I think why is a past-oriented word. Why did this happen? And why requires a because. So I like to be more in a what and a how. What is in the present, and how we're going to move forward, and how we can do things differently, rather than why. I don't know why Dr. Mengele grabbed me when I followed my mother and told me I'm going to just take a shower and I'm going to see her very soon, and threw me on the other side, which meant life. I don't know. I don't know, because I think that my life was in God's hand. My God was a loving God that guided me to turn hatred into pity. I felt so sorry for the gods. So his forgiveness is not me forgiving you. It's me not allowing anyone to take residence in my body that may poison my spirit. So this is that idea of reclaiming the joy and passion in life. Because if I hate you, you don't suffer, I do. So I'm very selfish, you know. I want to have joy, I want to have passion, and if I would just struggle with the hatred from the past, I would become a hostage or a prisoner of the past, and I refuse to do that. I don't allow that Hitler to take over my life. And I think there is a Hitler in every one of us, and there is goodness and kindness, and you have a choice. That's why the book is called A Choice. Whether you choose to be miserable or you choose to be curious. That curiosity kept me alive, truly, in Auschwitz. And I'm very fortunate that I was able to go back to school and have the IQ and the EQ, the emotional IQ, and that comes from Auschwitz. Now, you don't have to go to Auschwitz to know suffering. Life is suffering, but suffering is feelings. So I like to embrace the feeling the feeling, and then release that. So it's a kind of a journey, not to run from a feeling. It's just a feeling. There is no right or wrong feeling. There is only my feeling. There's only your feeling. So don't judge a feeling. Just allow yourself to feel the feeling and then decide how you're going to hold on to it and how you are able to legitimize that feeling. It's nothing wrong with anger. It's really how you channel it. But underneath of anger is a lot of pain. There's a lot of fear. Anger is not a primary emotion. Anger is when you expected one thing and you got another. And then you have to see the gap between your expectations, whether they are realistic or unrealistic.
It's amazing how much of our human conflict comes from unclear expectations with each other, isn't it?
That's right. 40 expectations, you said it.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you one other thing. One of the things our audience is always hearing from me is that leaders are learning and growing and changing their mind on things. And in doing all this work, and especially writing this book, what have you changed your mind on in the last few years?
I changed my mind in many, many ways. But most of all, what am I going to hold on to and what am I willing to let go of? I totally give up the need for other people's approval. I tell you what I tell you, and then if you like it, fine. I think my best four-letter word is risk. And I let you know I like to get to know you. But if you tell me, no, I don't want to have anything to do with you, I don't think I was rejected. I just wanted something and I didn't get it. There is no such thing as rejection. No one can reject me but me. I also give up the need to any kind of perfectionism, that I have to do things right. Whatever I do, and if it's okay, it's okay, and if not, I will not really punish myself as I used to, that I didn't deserve to survive. And I'm saying now to myself that there is a way that I was left here to be able to perhaps do what I do now, to be a good role model for the young people.
That is interesting you say that, because that is exactly where I landed too. Your story is my family's story too. The Nazis showed up. The Nazis showed up at my grandmother's house when she was a teenager, and it started a journey that landed her and me in America as well. And her story is very different in many ways from yours, but in a lot of ways, it's very much the same too. And in reading this book, the thing that I couldn't help but coming back to is what a brilliant job you have done with this book and in your life of giving voice to the experiences of so many, my grandmother included, who couldn't, for whatever reason, be voices for themselves. God bless you, Edie, for the hard work you've done to be where you are today, to give voice to the voiceless, to be a teacher of love and forgiveness out of this horrific time in human history. Thank you so much for it. I'm so grateful for your work and your message and for what you've shared with us today.
You're so welcome, and I have faith in you that you will continue this, and pretty soon we're going to hold hand in hand, and we're going to have a human family, so we can finally make it and survive with each other, and we'll be brothers and sisters. And that's my hope, and that's what you're doing. So I'm with you on that. You can count on my support as long as I'm here.
Dr. Edith Eger is the author of The Choice, Embrace the Possible. Edie, thank you so much.
Thank you.
I don't think I can overstate what a beautifully written book this is. It was such a joy to read. If you were just going to read one book this year, this would probably be the one. And thank you also to Daniel Pink, who first put this book on my radar screen about 6 months ago. Thanks, Dan. I appreciate it. And a few related episodes to today's conversation. If you go into the membership portal on the Coaching for Leaders website and click on the inspiration button in the podcast library, you will come up with episode 103 as one of the past episodes. That episode is titled Everyday People, Extraordinary Leaders, and I interviewed Olivia Klaus on her movie Sin by Silence. She produced the movie, and it ultimately led to the change of laws here in the state of California around domestic abuse. It's a fabulous story, and the work she has done in this space is just incredible. Check that out again, episode 103. On episode 204, I had Amy Morin on the show. She talked about things mentally strong people don't do. It is based on her book, The 13 Things That Mentally Strong People Don't Do. She talked about her experience of losing her husband at a very young age and all of the lessons and obstacles and also the just the strategies that came out of that horrible experience in her life that have helped her to gain strength. And she taught us about that on episode 204. Also, episode 281, Collins Oseamwe was on the show. He talked about how to overcome obstacles. Collins, growing up in Nigeria and having very little access to education and professional development that many of us who listen to the show do have access to, and yet still really growing into such an incredible leader in the facilities management industry, and now very much one of the leaders in that industry. It's a wonderful story, episode 281. And then finally, very recently, Jeff Hittenberger was on the show talking about growth mindset and how it will help you to rise up from the ashes on episode 326. Jeff is our chief academic officer here in Orange County, California for the Department of Education, oversees a huge staff overseeing all the schools here in the county. And Jeff talked about his journey, not only with their staff on helping to bring in that growth mindset, but perhaps most importantly, his own journey and his journey with his family in raising a special needs child and how he's been challenged to develop his growth mindset. Episode 326 is a wonderful listen. All of those episodes you can track down in the podcast library on the coachingforleaders.com website. And if you already have set up your free membership, you know how to access it. If you haven't, and if this is your first time listening, I'd encourage you to go over to coachingforleaders.com right now. You can activate your free membership. It'll give you access to all those episodes and many more that are searchable by topic. It'll also give you access to my free 10-day audio course titled 10 Ways to Empower the People You Lead. It is featuring so much of the wisdom that you've heard on the show over the last 7, almost 8 years now. Again, that's at coachingforleaders.com. Now, a quick note before I tell you what's coming next week. Last year, some of you will remember that I had Brenda Bernstein on the show talking and teaching us about LinkedIn and how to really get the most out of LinkedIn. It's been one of the episodes that I continue to hear from people on that has been most helpful in leveraging our online presence in the world and especially professionally. She is going to be back on the show in about a month doing a follow-up to our episode on LinkedIn. We'll be doing a 2.0 version. She's also going to be talking about some of the new design changes that LinkedIn has implemented. If you have a question about LinkedIn, about how to represent yourself well online, how to use the service, profile questions, how to find a position. If it's related to LinkedIn, it's fair game. Here's what to do. If you're already connected with me on LinkedIn, send me a message on LinkedIn. Let me know you have a question for the show. If you're not already connected with me on LinkedIn, just do a quick search for me, connect with me, let me know you're a listener, and send along your question with the connection. I'd love to consider it and to bring it into that episode with Brenda Bernstein, so be watching for that in the next month or so. But next week, I'm glad to welcome Morten Hansen to the show. He is going to be teaching us 6 tactics to achieve extraordinary performance. He is the author of the new book, Great at Work. He's a professor at Berkeley. I think you're going to find the research that he's been doing to be really fascinating, and we're going to be looking at what are some of the key tactics that have come out of the research that you can do and use to perform even more effectively, not only for yourself, but for others. So join us next week for that. Hey, thank you so much to Dilshan in Australia and Saruk in the UK for the kind reviews you left on iTunes. Thank you so much to you both. Dilshan said they're on episode 158, so it's going to be a while until you hear this, but thank you so much for the kind review. Hey, if you've been listening for a bit and have a moment, I would love it if you take a moment to review the show. coachingforleaders.com/iTunes is where to go for that. See you next week for how to achieve extraordinary performance.